Hello, everybody. On today's episode, we are building off of the Founder Mode series. In last episode, we talked about the founder's mindset, and so today we are going to be focusing more on the idea of modes and what modes you need to lean into and master as a visionary founder or CEO. So we'll cover the different modes, where to lean into them, where you might be lacking, where you might be insufficient, and how to build these into your processes, schedule, and structure to make life easier and more effective for you. Thank you and enjoy. All right. So continuing on with the founder mode series
Yes.
that we unintentionally created. All right, wanted to start off with one episode in founder mode. I guess we'll
I get
keep
yeah.
going.
Yeah.
And so this is
So I always thought it would be a series. I mean, I have 13 articles on it, so ready to.
those
out.
those articles are an hour long.
No, they're not.
So it's a little different.
Yeah.
So today we're going to focus more on the mode side, which we
Yes.
kind of touched on in the first episode.
Yeah.
Right. Making sure that you're in the right mode, the right mindset.
Yeah.
We covered the mindset side, the founder mindset.
And we define founder as well, because that's a pretty critical part of this whole discussion.
Yes. Founder, what does that mean? What does that mindset look like?
By the way, did you have the definition of mode to share? Because I didn't bring it with me.
No, well, you're the one that has all your weird definitions.
No, the definition of the word mode.
Do we pull up the definition of the word mode? Okay, I will do that. And I will, while I'm doing that, you say what you feel your definition of mode is.
We all are in, lots of different modes during the day, right? There's the mode where we're relaxing. There's a mode where we're doing research. There's a mode where we're writing. There's a mode where we're focused. There's a mode where we're coaching. There's a mode where we're leading people. There are a bunch of different modes that I think all of us are in across the day, the week, the year, right? There's planning mode, annual planning mode, there's quarterly planning mode, et cetera. There's meeting mode. And I think it's helpful to understand what mode you're in. And in one of the articles, I write a story about how I really sort of became, I say, a huge fan of understanding the mode and declaring the mode. And I don't think I did this. Did I do it in the last episode?
I don't think so.
Where I talked about why when people would come to me.
Well, we did talk about that. That's where this whole episode idea is. Yeah, this episode's idea came from.
So basically, it's like I can't be sitting here wearing a judge hat and a coach hat and an advisor hat all at the same time. I need to know, are you asking me to judge something, right? Back in the old days when we were doing lending and investing. Do you want me to coach you, right? Do you want me to, help you think about how to grapple with one of the issues that you're dealing with in your underwriting process, et cetera? And when people tried to mix modes and actually not even be clear with me about what mode they wanted me to be in, I got frustrated because ultimately I felt like I was kind of getting manipulated a little bit because people would come in, hey, will you help us think about this? And the next thing you know, they're asking me to approve something. And we have a very specific approval process. We have an investment committee, and you share the information with the investment committee. And then ultimately, right, you would sit with the investment committee and you would answer questions, and the investment committee would right then and there let you know what its thoughts were on whether it was approving the deal or going to modify something. And so anyway, I got to the place where I said, look, you can only come into me and ask me to be, wear one hat, be in one mode. And that made it so much healthier for all of us and ultimately saved lots and lots of time. So anyway, did you find the definition of mode?
There's a lot of definitions of mode. I almost wanted to share like a really bad one. I think the best one is a manner of acting or doing, method, way. That one makes sense. Yeah, for this, not the value that occurs most frequently within a set of data. I don't think that's not that's all we're going for, or just another word for mood. Now, also, not what I mean, mood is affected by modes. Yeah,
But if you're asking me to play 4 modes at the same time, I'm probably going to be in a really, weird mood. If not
and
frustrated
moods can
mood.
dictate your mode.
Anxious mood.
Yeah.
Mode.
So you brought up the definition thing, is there something that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think that just make sure that, we at the setup of all this, you recognize there's a bunch of different modes and that we're all, um, entering into and exiting from. And I think it's actually really good if the mode you're in matches the moment you're in.
So what would you say are for founders or visionaries, the essential or the expected main modes that you have to be in?
Well, the main modes, um, and then I do want to talk about founder mode as a mode, but the because I don't think founder mode. I want to be really crystal clear on what I think founder mode is, because founder mode is not, you know, me being in meeting mode. If founder mode is not being in coaching mode. Founder mode is not being in planning mode or problem solving mode, right? It's a different thing. But I do think that, if we go back to some of the archetypes, right? There's moments where the founder needs to be in warrior mode, right? You're fighting for, the good of the company, and hopefully the good of the company is fighting for the good of the company's clients, right? Ultimately, you're fighting to build high trust relationships with all of your ideal stakeholders. And so sometimes you need to go into warrior mode. Other times you need to go into philosopher mode, which is to explain why things matter, why our core values are the way they are, why we do things like the things that we do. As an example, we have hierarchies of competency within our company. So explaining why hierarchies of competency are important, explaining, what the competencies are associated with each of these hierarchies, and talking about things like time and philosophy, right? And so sometimes there's philosopher mode. Sometimes there's, we're just, you've been a part of these for, now many, many years, right? We're in just being together mode. We're having dinner. We've got, we had, the senior leadership team to the farm, and we're sitting around the fire at 10 o'clock at night, and we're just enjoying being with one another. And yeah, occasionally there's, stupid conversations that take place that are sort of kind of work related, but a lot of times it's just storytelling and appreciating one another. And so there's another mode, right? Storytelling mode. And so, and when you think about the founder as sort of the king of that kingdom, the founder has moments where they're in warrior mode, moments where they're in philosopher mode, moments where I was just talking about being in lover mode, just building the emotional connectivity that you have with your people. And then there's magician mode, right? Where if you're a founder who's an inventor, right? I mean, you're inventing something, you're taking some idea and you're turning it into life. There's a lot of times where I'm in sort of magician mode, trying to help people understand why we're building the things that we're doing and why certain things matter more than others.
So we have these modes,
Yes.
and for some people, certain modes are going to be more difficult to access and lean into and activate
Yeah.
than others. What is your experience with what modes are difficult for visionaries to lean into?
So visionaries versus founders, right? Words matter.
Yeah,
Right.
founders.
Yeah. So a visionary founder and or CEO, because that's really what we tend to, when we're thinking about our ICP, that's really my primary focus is visionary founders and visionary CEOs. Because I believe that to lead well, you need to know where the company should be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, depending upon where it is developmentally. Um, but, I think that you need to, the founder needs to match the mode for the moment, right? And so let's just do magician mode, right, as an example, using the definition that I think you have here, which is, early on, you need to go and sort of, go up into the forest, onto a mountain, go somewhere where you can just sort of have a broader perspective on things, and really sort of get clear on what's important for you, our forever agreements, right? Who's your ICP? Are you genuinely, you know, um, passionate about helping them? Do you have a strong sense for how you're going to help them, your compelling value proposition? Do you have a sense for why this is important and why this work needs to be done? And is it something that you think will stand the test of time, your compelling why, how you're making the world a better place? And so I think, getting those forever agreements in place is part of, you're in magician mode, you know, during that. Obviously, if you're all of a sudden dealing with a lot of competitors and you're feeling as if your position in the marketplace is being challenged and you're losing market share as opposed to growing market share, or you're struggling to define your market, those are times where, you need to enter into a little bit of the warrior mode, right? Or when, and sometimes, even internally, there may be moments where, you have a very clear sense of who you are and who the company is, but not everybody in the company either understands it or worse, right? They're actually antithetical to it, because we've seen this before, right? And now you're a little bit of, you're in warrior mode a little bit internally. You're fighting to protect the things that you believe are super important and should stand forever. So, on occasion, that warrior mode is internally directed as opposed to externally directed. Now, obviously, part of the other mode that comes into play there is what I would say is philosopher mode, which is, how do you deal with these situations, right? And what's culturally appropriate for your organization? How do you handle and how do you enter into these conflicts and do it in a manner that you'll be proud of, and that won't come back to sort of hurt you in terms of the culture you're building. So, you know, uh, I think that, as I said, the modes need to match the moment, and sometimes, you'll like it when we had our annual retreat here, um, 2 weeks ago now, right? Feels like yesterday, but feels a long time ago in some regards. But, when I was going through the night, doing the 90 minutes on the moment we were in, I think I went through several. I was in storytelling mode, right? I was in philosopher mode at some times. I was in teaching mode. I was in coaching mode. And so I went through a number of modes, just during that talk, that presentation. And so I think, just being clear about, like, as I said, the moment you're in, clear about the mode that you need to be playing or entering into, and being effective while in it is super important. But then I also, I keep wanting to go back and talking about what I believe founder mode is, right? And I believe founder mode is when there's dissonance, right? And people aren't seeing things, and you've got the sort of the prototypical visionary founder, right? Which is they're highly intuitive. They're thinking about all the things. They're more, that you could be. Most of the visionary founders are relatively intuitive, statistically speaking. Statistically speaking, they lean more towards thinkers than feelers. Obviously, you can have both, but statistically speaking, there's a lot more thinkers out there. And so, you're thinking about things, you're seeing how things are connected. And sometimes, you're trying to explain things that you have yet to be able to articulate well. And that can be frustrating a little bit. And we've done this, we've experienced this. I've experienced this over the 8 years almost that we've had this company. And I refer to those moments where there's the founders not being articulate, the founder's struggling, the founder's anxious. It's because something is off, and the founder knows it, but the founder can't quite put their finger on it. And so they're trying to figure out how to get to the bottom of it. And that's when what I think is really founder mode comes into play. And depending upon the intensity of the founder, sometimes that's, they don't handle that. I don't handle it. We don't handle it all that well, dealing with the ambiguity, dealing with the uncertainty, dealing with trying to figure out how to articulate something that's hard to articulate, but deep down inside, you just know it's wrong.
Yeah, you'll encounter a lot of issues as a founder.
Yeah.
Especially things you have not understood or seen before. And rather than playing whack-a-mole, which is
Yes.
something that you talk about a lot,
Yeah.
and just trying to hit the issues when they come up, it's important to, right, that'd be the king mode, going in and seeing everything that's happening,
Right.
identifying where the issues are, and then addressing them foundationally, right? Address the core issue,
Yeah.
and it's much easier to do that when you have a holistic and complete understanding of your domain.
Right. And all the essential back to this board that's in front of us, right? Sort of staying with the whack-a-mole thing. There's, you know, I think, Gino Wickman, said somewhat tongue in cheek, or wrote this too, right? That every single business has about 126 issues, right? And and if they're disorganized and they're all over the place, it'll just drive you crazy. So part of the stages of development is getting your act together in terms of all these things that really matter. And the reality is that sometimes, you think this is the issue, but it's actually, 3 steps away and you don't realize it. And then you start going in there and then, maybe you're running around. And so you solve for what you thought was the obvious issue. But then, maybe at 3 in the morning, you wake up and you realize, well, it's not that issue. And in fact, there's another issue in front of that, another issue in front of that, another issue in front of that. And you're like, oh, that's the real issue over here. And so we go and solve that issue. And all of a sudden, the solve that you shared yesterday doesn't make sense anymore. And so now people are like, but you said this yesterday. And you're like, well, you know what? The facts, I understand the facts better today. And so, yeah, I changed my mind. And, we've talked about this before in the podcasts. That's a part of founder mode, right? And it said, look, if the facts change, I reserve the right to change my perspective. And just because I said something doesn't mean that I can't change my mind. But a lot of people, especially, as you move your way down and throughout the organization, if and this is part of the challenge of being a founder, when you say things, people are like, okay, Mark said this. Now, well, wait a second, Mark said this. And now it's like, but now Mark's saying this. And it's like, that's hard sometimes for people. And that's part of what founder mode is it's, when you think about it from the perspective of the non-founder, it's being at peace with the fact that, if the facts change, you need to change your perspective.
So what would you say, just two, I feel like rebuttals,
Right.
for that kind of founder mode?
Yeah.
I think there's the flip-flopping that people perceive,
Right.
which from my experience seems to occur more, or people take issue with it more often when they don't understand the whole picture
Yeah.
and they see you flip-flop on something on the surface and it's like, well, we adjusted something foundational, like just a little bit,
Yeah.
and then that creates a big shift up top.
Yeah.
And so that's a concern. But I think there's a lot of people that feel like they don't have the time or whatever to really dig into the core issues.
Yes.
And so they just feel like they're playing whack-a-mole and they don't enjoy that.
Yeah.
But the idea of going and really ironing them out at the core seems daunting. What would you say to those people?
Well, once again, there's a number of things. So just recognizing that the earlier stages are going to have more founder mode moments in them where, new news, new information comes in, new facts come in, and it's like, no, that doesn't make sense anymore. Or, even positioning in terms of marketing, well, yeah, but this is better and this is better. There's lots of grinding that takes place over the first 3 stages, just tremendous amount of grinding that takes place over the first three stages. And that grinding generates different sets of data. And over time, what you hope is there's less and less and less sort of changes taking place in terms of things that are fundamental, and that more and more and more of this board that we're talking about gets set up, and it's explicit, it's coherent, it's resonant, all the pieces make sense. And so you get to the place where this board is, goes from being lots of changes, and let's just say that, hard changes are red, soft changes are yellow, stuck forever is green. And so just the table goes from having all these, red, yellow, and green going on all the place to becoming less red, yellow, and green, more yellow and green, more and more green, right? And then of course what'll happen at some point is then you take on another stage, and maybe you have a different product, you're enter into a different market, and all of a sudden now you're into, the blue ocean again, right? And when you get into those oceans, things are going to be, red, yellow, and green. And then, so each stage you're going to have this transition from lots of things, lots of uncertainty, and lots of things being not well defined to things becoming more and more and more defined. And so you just need to recognize, if you're dealing with a founder and as a founder, that it's going to be messy. And, the best thing you need to be able to do is just sort of explain. And I think damn good, great founders just say, hey, I changed my mind, or hey, I was wrong. Right. And sometimes it's, you leave on one day and you come back the next day and you're like, hey, I was wrong. Right. I was thinking about what you said yesterday, and I think, you're onto something here. And so it's just, it's just messy going through the first four stages for sure. And then I think it gets messy when you evolve the business into a new product or a new service or a new market or a new ICP.
And if you build, right, as you said, the red, yellow, green, if you start building off of red or yellow things,
Yeah.
that's not going to make life easier moving forward.
Yeah.
Just putting off the problem, sort of sweeping it under the rug.
Yeah.
Because eventually there will be a flood, and you want to make sure that the dikes you've built up are pretty strong.
Yeah. And this is why, look, I always say, you take thinkers, feelers, doers, and critics, right? It takes all four of those archetypes to build something of enduring value. And so as a founder, right, you need to lean in hard to making sure that you're creating an environment where you can get the support and the feedback and the participation from all four of those, creator types. And you'll know where things are, they're still in flux, and where things, no, I feel very strong about this, right? And you start lining it up until at some point, right, the vast majority of things that matter are explicit, coherent, and resonant, and people get it and they understand it. And by the way, it takes years.
So when it comes to the organization and creating processes and structure, how can you do that in order to, I don't want to say optimize, but allow for accessing and effectiveness of different modes?
Well, as you know, I don't like the term optimize, but I think one of the ways I think about optimization is, you gotta get it to the place. If you sort of buy into the notion in the research that says 15% failure rates, sort of are plus or minus optimal for learning and growing, right? So, optimization in theory then is getting to a place where, 85% of the stuff's working really, really well, and you're constantly working on that 15, and that 15 changes based upon the stages you're at.
Do you think there's a way to develop or instill processes or structure within the organization
Yeah,
that allow processes specifically for the visionary founder,
Yeah.
CEO, that allows for, right, making sure that the modes are explicit and being leveraged appropriately?
Well, I think, it's why we're such huge believers in understanding the stages of development, right? Because the priorities change from stage to stage to stage, right? And so, it's back to, processes as an example, right? I don't think you need to be putting in an excessive amount of energy into really nailing the process competency until somewhere, starting around stage 3 or stage 4. You should just sort of be at peace with it being a little bit messy, and you should let everybody around you know that, hey, right, we're going to be a little bit messy here. And obviously, if the processes are broken and harming your high trust relationships with all of your ideal stakeholders, one or more of them, you should be focusing on that, right? But in terms of just like all of your core processes documented, followed by all working really, really well, there are other things, if you haven't addressed them, that are more important to address. So, figuring out exactly, sort of where you should be focusing is very stage dependent, in my opinion. And then by definition, back to modes and moments, right? Where you should be focused is based upon the moment you're in. The moment you're in is based upon the stage you're in, right? Back to not complicated. This is not that complicated. Yes, it's hard, but just understand the stage you're in, focus on the things that are really important for that particular stage, enter into the modes that are necessary for you to be in order to be an effective visionary founder and or CEO. Now, in theory, right, CEOs do not join companies that are in stage 2 or 3. Right.
They could.
They could.
It's not likely or thought
Likely. I have lots of issues with people who think this is a thing that's easy to do or wise to do.
a thing, a foolish thing to plan for.
Yes. Yeah. But that's a whole nother episode, if you will, right? Podcast. But, when you're the visionary founder, just, recognize the moment you're in, stage you're in, what the things are you need to focus on. Recognize, obviously, part of this journey is surrounding yourself with great people and getting the level of talent you need for the moment you're in, given who you are. And I know that's complex. That's the complex part. That's the hard part, right? It's figuring out, I'm still head of brand, right? And here we are, stage 5, and you could say, well, I should have given that up. And we're not done yet, right? We're getting close. We're getting close. Maybe by the end of Q1, we feel really, really good about, the core elements of brand. But here we are, that'll be 8 years. That'll be 8 years of generating revenue. And I'm still, right, wearing that particular hat.
Yeah. Well, if we define brand as basically being the soul of the company.
Yeah.
And so makes sense for that to be the last weird seat you let go of.
And as we were out in the market searching for our CMO and meeting with lots of people, there have been people who've been, within our company who sort of, don't love it that I'm involved with brand as much as I am. It's like, why haven't you given that up? But met a lot of CMOs who worked with founders who no, right? This is just part of, and you could say it's part of founder mode.
I think it is.
Yeah.
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 Especially when we're very particular about that.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard to go out and find someone to take that off the plate.
Well, and we've been, as you say, not just particular about it, but we've been extraordinarily clear that building a high trust brand is extraordinarily important if we're going to end up doing the things that we want to do, if we're going to end up helping in the way we'd like to help. And so, yeah, it's core to doing this right is core to who we are, in my opinion.
And it makes things a lot slower.
Yeah.
And costs us more money than it.
Yeah. It costs us a lot of money. So yeah.
Mostly in terms of we're doing a lot. There's a lot of things that we're not doing that we could be doing to make money.
Yeah.
But we're not doing those things because we are prioritizing our principles and our values and whatever over those things and authenticity.
1,000%.
We still believe are the right things to do.
Yeah.
But it's difficult from, I think we're really good at it now, but there are definitely times in the past where you can't really rationalize or verbalize the argument as well as you'd like to,
100%
as to why we're not doing something.
And that's when I'm looking like I'm in founder mode, right? It's
You'd never want to say because I say so, but
right. No, because it doesn't fly. But sometimes, you have to. It's helpful for people to appreciate that founders don't have all the answers. They're obviously deeply invested in the company. It's a form of a child, right? And so they're deeply invested in it. They deeply care about it. They're not trying to do what's wrong. You may not understand why they're doing what they're doing. You may not understand why they're so intense about something, but it's super helpful if you lean into trying to understand and if you don't understand, asking questions. Why? you know? And I think that a damn good, if not great founder is comfortable saying, I can't explain this perfectly well right now, and I hate that for you, and I hate that for me, but I know I'll get there, and I know I'll be able to do that, and plus or minus, this is the stuff that's going through my head right now.
Yeah, it's like you left a comment in one of the brand documents yesterday
Yeah.
saying, the note was, or the sentence was something along the lines of creating everything with intention, whether that be logical or not.
Yes.
And you took issue with the or not part.
Right.
But there's times where you can't accurately verbalize the thing. And the goal is to be able to explain it later on.
Yes.
But sometimes you just get an instinct, a feeling, an emotion where it's like, I got to do this thing.
Right.
And you will figure out whether that made sense or not. And then hopefully, or I mean, you will, if you care, see how that fits into the bigger piece, and you'll learn from that moment.
And the framework, a framework that can be used to explain this goes back to 85-15.
That's in the note.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
It's in there.
Yeah.
And it's like, is it 15%? Is like, do you want 85% of the things you do to be logically explicit?
Yes.
Probably. It's probably somewhere like that. I was like 85, it could be 15%, it could be 5%.
Yes.
Definitely not 0%.
Right.
So where do you want that thing to live? And then that's right. That's how you expand your area of understanding. It's like, oh, I have a feeling about this. I want to know why. Lean into that, explore it, let it fill you up.
Yeah.
And sort through it.
But, and it's interesting too to think about, once again, founders versus non-founders and sort of roles, accountabilities, responsibilities, objectives, all this stuff that goes into building a complex adaptive system that's well built and scalable, right? That's 85-15 is everywhere, right? It's not just a founder thing. I mean, you as an employee, whether you're a department head or you're a team leader or you're an individual, right? It's hard. It would be impossible to live in a world that where 100% is the goal.
If that was going to be a pretty boring world,
and where you're not allowed to push and where you're not allowed to fail and where you're not allowed to experiment, right?
That's just living within the known world, and that's going to lead to boredom, apathy, lack of, you're not going to be stressed out,
right?
Probably,
right.
Eventually, I mean, you will be stressed at first. You got to hit 100%, but then you just lower your expectations, and then there's no meaning, there's no engagement behind any of that.
Yeah.
And so that's the other part, right? You talk about stress, and it's like, well, you have to be stressed a little bit. Eric Dodson.
Yeah.
But that's just engagement. That's you finding that balance for yourself on the verge of the known and unknown.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So even sitting within your seat, there may be a time where, let's just say you're really good, at this thing, and you're sort of in a stratum 1 seat, and so you're working on things that are, objectives that are less than 90 days, and quality and quantity is important, and following processes is important, but and you're good at your job, but all of a sudden now you're like, well, I'd like to take on a rock, or I'd like to take on teaching someone, right? And now all of a sudden you've moved into an area where teaching someone what you're doing, right? And now you've moved into an area that, you're not an expert at, right?
You're not an expert at that, and it's also going to reveal a lot of things that you don't know as well as you thought you did.
Yes. Yeah. And so, this is healthy. This is good, right? And so, I think a healthy organization appreciates sort of, for lack of a better expression, 85-15, all the way out around and through to the edges, right? And we don't try to hold everybody to perfection, and that goes from the founder all the way down, and that goes from the founder looking in the mirror to the founder, right? Playing coach, or playing leader, or playing magician, or playing, whatever it is, whatever mode they're in. And then, all the way back up, right? We shouldn't demand that everybody's perfect. Now, as we've talked about before, obviously if you're at 50-50 and you're screwing up and or worse, right? You're repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. Well, then that's not going to work particularly well for anybody.
Well, it's not going to work well for the organization.
Yeah.
You're going to feel very demoralized, and that's going to make it worse. How do we get into the Matthew principle there? And right. So if you're doing well, you're going to probably do better. If you're not doing well, then you're probably going to do worse.
Yeah.
Basically, that's not it. That's how it would apply to here.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit of grow or die.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
could do we get to do an episode on grow or die,
Yeah.
Matthew principle,
Yeah.
and the 85-15 in both growth and Pareto distributions and prices law.
Yeah.
That'd be an
Good
interesting one.
episode. Yeah.
So I guess to get it back onto the main idea, do you think for and for anybody basically, but especially for visionary founders and CEOs, planning and scheduling for different modes is helpful? For example, like planning your calendar, like, I do this in the mornings.
Oh,
On these days, I do this in the afternoons.
is right. One of the things that we talk about is, what EOS has a term clarity break, right? Which is that, that's one of the modes every week we encourage, as a coach, I've always been encouraging the founders I work with and all the members of the senior leadership team, I Friday mornings, that's, I think, probabilistically speaking, that works the best for most humans, for most leaders, right? You should take, I like to say take, up to an hour, certainly half an hour to an hour, and go and just find a place where you can reflect on the week and how things, and without any agenda other than to just reflect, right? And so you have Gino Wickman would say you have a yellow legal pad, and just sit there and reflect. And so reflection mode, right, for sure, right. And then as you and I've talked about, especially with creators, and we're all creators, so it's interesting, right? But what people tend to think of as the highly creative folks.
There's a spectrum where you're going to creator versus manager, right? It's a
Right. But we're all creators, as I say, right? Depends upon, which type you typically are more of, right? Whether it's the thinker, the feeler, the doer, the critic, and a lot of times the critics are the, classic managers, right? High fact finders, high follow throughs, things like that. But, for those of us who are literally creating things from scratch, like whether you're a writer or you're an engineer or you're a designer or you're working on, let's just say, production, you're a producer, anything that's got a creative element where you are by yourself, right?
flow state
Flow state
work, basically.
right? When that is a mode. And I have that mode scheduled on my calendar for, for hours every single day. Some days it gets violated because there's so much going on and I need to participate in a meeting. And so that flow mode section of my calendar gets deleted and meetings get inserted. But I think a lot of people, there's flow mode. I love that, right? Your framing of that. And so, you need to have that on your calendar. There's meeting mode, there's coaching mode. All right. So I have, my team leadership mode, my C-suite, and then with the SLT. And then I'm transitioning away from being the CMO. We obviously have a new CMO, but I'm going to transition that responsibility from me to Sean. And so, I'll have that team meeting. And then I also, I work with our content team. And so I have a meeting. So I have team meetings, 4 or 5 or 6 every single week that are scheduled. I have one-on-one meetings with every single one of my direct reports, right? So that's meeting mode. And then I have, sort of other types of meetings that get scheduled. And so, yeah, so there are certainly buckets of modes that I have literally built into my calendar. Right. And then of course there's board mode where I'm meeting with my, board members. I have, I'm really, I'm a huge, I try to understand the math of everything. And so, one of the meetings I'm going to have, this afternoon is our financial model. I have a meeting to go through how our financial model's performing versus expectations, and what do we need to do to if there's anything to the model itself. And I have those meetings probably, well, certainly once a month, if not twice a month. So there's a bunch of different meetings, and some meetings I'm there as a, as a problem solver. Some meetings I'm there as a coach. Some meetings I'm there as a facilitator, right? I literally have certain meetings where, like quarterlies, where I'm facilitating someone's quarterly, and I sit there, and you've experienced it, right? Where I'll say, okay, I'm going to wear a facilitator hat.
You mean glasses?
That's right. Yeah. So we did that, right? So I'm going to wear a facilitator hat, and then I'm going to let you know if I can't help myself, but I'm going to switch from facilitator mode to
Founder mode.
founder mode. And so, we did this last week. And when I went into founder mode, I took off my glasses and I put my sunglasses on, and we all got a kick out of those moments where I was sitting there doing my Tom Cruise risky business thing, because they're Ray-Bans.
Yeah, that completely threw me out. Right. I think there's research around this, and I'm probably gonna screw up the number, but I think it takes 10 minutes to refocus after something as simple as just switching application.
Yeah.
So if you're constantly switching gears,
It's horrible.
you're just wasting time. You're gonna be very inefficient. And obviously, if you are a manager and you're in manager mode,
Yeah.
you got to kind of do that.
Yeah.
Like we're going between emails or Slack or
Yeah.
whatever, checking things in a project manager.
Yeah.
But when you're in creator, maker, flow mode,
Yes.
and you have to do that, that can just completely ruin the whole thing.
Right.
Just putting a meeting in the middle of that is like,
Yeah.
well, all right, now I have half an hour before, half an hour after of what was a 90-minute block. And
Right.
it's like, I'm not going to get anything important done in those 2 30-minute breaks. So the addition of a 30-minute meeting ruins 90 minutes.
Yeah. And so that's a part, that's a part of, damn good and great founders, in my opinion. They respect that concept, right? And you create an organization that respects sort of flow/maker mode. And there's a lot of things that you got to, once again, not complicated, just hard, but, you ultimately, you want to set up this complex adaptive system so it respects the nature of humans, respects the nature of being modal, for lack of a better term. And
That's a good term.
yeah, yeah, right. And there's always going to be an exception, a violation, but it should be thoughtful, and you should be able to explain why. And once again, we can have a debate whether or not 95% of the time, if there is a exception, whether it was a valid exception, or obviously if you just like it's all about me and you're constantly interrupting people, that you're not being a damn good, if not great visionary founder, in my opinion.
Yeah, there'll be times where your plans are messed up.
Yeah.
But the act of planning it out that's what's important. It's Eisenhower's, right? Plans are nothing, planning is everything.
Yeah.
As you gotta account for this, and then as there are going to be tons of times where something happens, and you're like, well, screw it, this is more important,
Right.
and use your better judgment to discern those.
Well, and then we even have in our lexicon, right, P0s and P1s, right? These are moments where, hey guys, yeah, I get this was your schedule and this was what you're going to work on, but we got a P0 right now, which happens extraordinarily rarely. We actually had one last week for the first time, I think, in a lot, in over a year, where Stripe went down. And so we had an issue for new companies, for companies coming on board, converting from trial to paid. And it was, I don't know, it was like, less than an hour. But that was a moment where everybody had to drop everything they were working on. And, the people that were involved, let's say it was 6 or 7 people, they had to, sort of switch mode.
Any concluding thoughts that you have?
I do think that, whether you're the founder or you're working with a founder, just understanding that there are these various modes. When it's clear which mode you're in, and that mode matches the moment you're in, yeah, that's easy for everybody, I think, generally speaking, right? When you're not clear about what mode you're in, and you're anxious and frustrated, and you're kind of spinning, you're in founder mode, right?
It's anxious and frustrated mode is not a fun mode.
No, and reacting and grinding and all that kind of stuff, and I think that passionate, damn good to great founders are going to find themselves in founder mode every now and then. We love founders. We need founders. They're the lifeblood of a healthy society, especially a a healthy free society. And I would suggest that, part of the whole reason I wrote Founder Mode the series is sort of to help people understand Founder Mode and why it exists and when it's showing up and how to appreciate it and to recognize that, it's just it it's impossible for it not to be there. You want to minimize it, but they're doing damn good, damn hard work, and they're trying the best they can. And so a little empathy, right, for the founder and Founder Mode, a little self-awareness, right? Because now the question is, as a founder, are you the one who's predominantly responsible for you being in Founder Mode, right? Because you haven't done all the work you need to do. And if that's the case, if you're spending a lot of time in what I'm calling Founder Mode, right, which is, it's like, go do that clarity break we talked about, or go, head to a mountain or a river, whatever it is you can get away and sort of have a broader perspective and think about, okay, so, given the moment I'm in, given the stage we're in, given what generally speaking, what needs to be a focus at this point in time in this moment, what could be better understood / explained / shared with the rest of your organization so that you can start to reduce the percentage of time you're in Founder Mode. And the other thing is, which we haven't talked at all about, right, which is that if you've never worked with a founder and a founder brings you in to a stage 4 or stage 5 company, or even a stage 3 company, and you've never worked with a founder, you've never been in an early stage business, you've never sort of suffered through the ups and downs that are associated with that. And, if you think that the founder, if you think it's healthy for you to try to box the founder out from understanding what's going on, from boxing the founder out from having an opinion, from boxing the founder out from seeing things, and if you think that's going to work, I would suggest you think twice. And there's an article on this.
It's a little bit of don't hide unwanted things in the fog.
Yeah,
Don't allow things to be hidden.
yeah, and the founder, if they don't understand what's going on, they're going to run around, right? It's going to be in their guts. So it's like, I don't understand. Why are we doing these things, right? And all of a sudden, if you spent, like, we've seen this happen lots of times, right? People will spend 3 months working on something that I'll have no clue about, and then all of a sudden they'll put it in front, and I'm like, wait a second, right? This doesn't make any sense given blah, 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 blah. And now I'm like, hey guys, you're making me look like a bad guy when no, that's not fair to me, right? And you're doing it in front of your colleagues, right? And it's not good for your colleagues. It's not good for you. It's not good for me. You've basically kept me out of something where I genuinely have some legitimate insight, perspective, and passion, right? And now we're sitting here looking back, and we wasted, I don't know, 100 hours, and it sucks for everybody, right? Especially, if you're a founder and, like, when you bootstrap, or, you're the one, is like, what people tend to forget early on is every single dollar that's being spent, for all practical purposes, is coming out of the founder's wallet, right? If let's just say that founder owns 50% of the company, every single dollar that's being spent, 50% of it's coming out of their wallet, right? Yeah, they care. They want to make sure that we're being smart with our money, with our scarce resources. And they want to make sure that they're creating a culture where people genuinely are thriving, right? And so when people, like, sort of, want to box the founder out and push them into, into a little bit of box, I think founders need to be, do their best to help everybody understand that's not healthy for me or you. And then the folks who are around founders need to understand that it's probably likely that they're more passionate and intense than you are about some stuff. And you may think it's excessive, but guess what? Life is a founder.